Hello friends! Welcome back to another day of online learning with Miss Sarah and Oscar. Today is Friday, April 3rd, 2020.
I wonder what the weather is like today. Let's go take a look and see. I wonder if it's sunny, cloudy, rainy, windy, if it's snowing.
Today has been a pretty rainy day with a lot of clouds off and on. It started off at 42 degrees and will go up to 53 degrees. So if you look at our thermometer, that puts us in that warm, cool zone. So if you're going to go outside, make sure you wear something to keep you warm and dry. Now it's time for our letter of the day. Today's letter of the day is Z. The sound the letter Z makes is Z. Z goes Z. Let's look at some things that start with the Z sound, the letter Z. A zebra starts with the letter Z, the Z sound. The number 0 starts with the Z sound. A zoo starts with the Z sound. Zoo, Z, zoo. A zebra can be found at the zoo. Zipper starts with Z. Zippers are those things that you can find on maybe a jacket or your pants. Zippers. Now let's practice writing our letter Z. If you can, grab a pencil or something to write with and some paper. If you don't have anything to write with, that's okay. You can use your pointer finger and trace in the air like this. So we have our skyline, our airplane line, and our ground line. To make the letter Z, we're going to do a straight line across the skyline, go down to the ground line, and across the ground line, like this. So straight across, and then diagonal down and across. Let's look at that one more time. So we're going to go across the skyline, a straight line down to the ground, and across. So the line is a straight line, but it's called a diagonal line because it doesn't go directly all from the skyline down to the ground. You have to go off to the side. Now, that was our uppercase Z. Our lowercase z is the exact same, but instead of starting at the skyline, we start at the airplane line. So our lowercase z will go from the airplane line down to the ground line, like this. Across, down, across. We'll look at that one more time, the uppercase and the lowercase. So for the uppercase Z, we'll start up at the skyline and go across, diagonal down, and across. Nice job. And now we'll do our lowercase z again. Remember, we're starting at that airplane line. So we go across, down, and across. Nice job, my friends. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now it's time for a story. Today's story is titled Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. This story is written by Judy Barrett and illustrated by Ron Barrett. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed towards the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best telltale bedtime story he'd ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that's what they ate. But it never rained rain, it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then, the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times, with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing, with a wonderful jello setting in the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the cats and dogs. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for the people's flower gardens. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. One day, there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day. The next day, there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Ugh. Another day, there was pea soup bog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Some of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close school. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream, cheese, and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomachache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly, running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there were no more school for children. So, a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter. took the absolute necessities with them, and set sail on their rafts for new land. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packed in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except snow and rain. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again, and nobody dared to go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. The next morning we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. The end.
Okay, friends, now that we've finished our story, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, I have a few questions for you that I'd like you to think about. So, put on your thinking caps, turn them on, whoop, and let's get thinking. So, I'm wondering, who is in our story? Who are the characters? If I'm trying to remember, I can think about different parts of the story. At the beginning of the story, there were some people who were sitting in a kitchen. There were also some people who were telling stories, listening to stories, going sledding. Who were those people? The other question I have for you is, when did food fall from the sky? Did it always fall from the sky all day long? Did it only happen one time? Did they know when it would happen? Think about that and see when food fell from the sky. The last question I have for you is a fun one. I want you to think about if you could have any food in the whole entire world fall from the sky, what would it be? I think that if I could, it would probably be Cheez-Its.
Excellent job, my friends. Thank you so much for joining.